Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare 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 Krishna. Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai, Jai, Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Sri Sri Gauritai, Sri Sri Radha Madhar, Jagannath, Baladev Subhadra Maharani, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Boris. And as always, let us say, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desacharane Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so would you like to be the reader tonight? Variety is the spice of life. Okay, welcome back to our Founder Acharya series. As promised, my favorite lesson. Fictional Prabhupads. Does anybody know who did these drawings? They're really kind of well known in the States because an American devotee did them, Prabhupada initiate. My godbrother Haripad Prabhu, who passed away not long ago. So I chose these two looking at each other because I can imagine the one on the left saying to the other, "Are you the real Srila Prabhupada?" And then the one on the right saying back to him, "I was wondering the same thing about you. Are you the real Srila Prabhupada?" So what does that mean? Well, here it is. While developing a personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada, it is important to recognize and dispel, get rid of, misconceptions we may have about him. Studying Prabhupada's teachings without studying his life and how he lived and applied those teachings can become impersonal. And becoming attached to Prabhupada's personality without studying and following his teachings can become sentimental. Both approaches leave us with a, quote, fictional Prabhupada, a make-believe Prabhupada. An imaginary Prabhupada we need to avoid. Let's look at some examples. So basically the whole lesson is looking at impersonal fictions and sentimental fictions. And then there's a bonus fiction, which you'll see at the end. I added it because that's the way these seminars evolve. As the times change, then something else comes up and you have to add something. All right, so Prabhu's going to read. Going to read that, Prabhu?
Impersonal fictions.
No, that doesn't sound. Is that supposed to amplify or no?
No,
It just connects to. Okay. Okay. So here are the impersonal fictions we're going to look at. Go ahead. All right. Boris is the new reader.
Okay. Impersonal fictions. Prabhupada is God. ISKCON is Prabhupada.
Yes, and try to read it the way I see. ISKCON is
ISKCON is Prabhupada.
That's a fiction.
The GBC is Prabhupada. Prabhupada is the guru only of his initiated disciples.
Okay, so let's look at the first one. Go ahead.
Fiction. Prabhupada is God.
In the spring of 1970, Srila Prabhupada had encountered a threat to his movement. I don't know if you know this, but it happened. While expanding Krishna consciousness throughout the Americas and Europe, he was meeting some resistance in India. Some spiteful swamis were trying to prevent ISKCON from acquiring land in Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Worse, they were spreading a minimized view of his divine grace, which was affecting the faith of some of Prabhupada's top leaders in America. To counter the threat, that July, it's the month I joined, July 70, Prabhupada formed a governing body commission of trusted devotees whom he would train to manage the movement's worldwide preaching in his absence. So I was brand new. I didn't know what was going on. This is all some stuff I didn't know about. But I would soon encounter it, as you're going to hear. After correcting the misled leaders, Prabhupada deployed 4 of them as sannyasis to travel and preach with full faith in Guru and Krishna. So, So Prabhupada knew where as Prabhupada put it, where the poison was coming from, the minimization of his position was coming from. It was coming from some jealous god brothers in India. And a couple of the devotees who were in India at the time, like Jaipataka, I don't think he was sannyas yet, Chudananda, they weren't sannyas quite yet. They were relaying this, misinformation to some of the devotees, to some of the leaders in America. And it was affecting some of them. They were thinking, oh, maybe Srila Prabhupada isn't all we thought he was. Maybe he's not, Because these god brothers were saying, oh yeah, Swami Maharaj, he was, we know him, from the 1920s and 30s. He was a businessman. And he's good at, drumming up business and recruiting people and raising funds. That's why he's successful. No. He was successful because he was so surrendered to the order of his Guru Maharaj, and therefore he was empowered to do what he did. Anyway, some devotees were getting affected by that minimization of Prabhupada. So what did Prabhupada do to those leaders who were getting affected? He just gave them, he did something very bold. He gave them sannyas. He told them to get out of the house, get out of your offices, go travel and preach. This is going to purify you. As the young renunciants toured ISKCON America that summer, the gravity of their offense to Prabhupada weighed on them. So they were thinking, oh my God, we were minimizing Prabhupada. How could we be so foolish to do that? Mortified at how they had been minimizing his spiritual stature, they then began to maximize him, even deify him, misinterpreting scriptural references about the spiritual master being non-different from Krishna. So they kind of, they went from one extreme to the other. They were minimizing Prabhupada, and then they were, like he was an ordinary man. And then they went to the other extreme to, deify him. Now, in late August, the group traveled to New Vrindavan, this group of sannyasis, West Virginia, for the Janmashtami Vyasa Puja festivals amid the largest gathering of ISKCON devotees to date. So the movement was still very small. So there was probably maybe 100 devotees in New Vrindavan. I was there because I was a brand new bhakta. I had just joined in Boston. I was a month-old devotee. And so Satsarup Das Adhikari said, okay, Dick Prabhu, you and Steve and a couple of others, you should go. Thank you. You should go with us to this festival. You're going to get very inspired by this Janmashtami Vyasa Puja festival. So we thought, but what do we walk into? Well, after the 10.5-hour drive from Boston to Moundsville, West Virginia, the van comes to a stop at New Vrindavan, and I slide open the Ford Econoline van door, and what do I see? I see Brahmananda, now Swami, big guy. He's he's passed since then, but he was a big, looked like a wrestler. He was taking a temple president by the collar and slamming him against the white farm fence and saying, Prabhupada is God. Prabhupada is Krishna. And because we haven't recognized this, he has left us. He's gone back to India. Actually, Prabhupada went to India to start ISKCON in India. That's what he was doing. And I remember they were using page 59 of the original Nectar of Devotion, where Lord Krishna says to Uddhava, "O Uddhava, know the Acharya to be my very self." So they got the oneness down, but they didn't know the difference, And nobody really knew the philosophy that well. I mean, the oldest devotee was a 4-year devotee, and there were very few books. There was the Gita now, and then Nectar of Devotion, and there was the first volume of Krishna book was out. So this was going on for days. The sannyasis were just, whoever would listen to them, they were preaching this Prabhupada is God philosophy. The sannyasis' apocalyptic message, Prabhupada is God, and because we haven't recognized him, he has rejected us and gone back to India. Without understanding that Prabhupada is Krishna, they said, our chanting is useless. You've maybe heard the recordings of Vishnu Jan Swami, legendary Kirtaniya in my day. So this person was not ordinary. He could sing and dance Hare Krishna all day. I mean, he was like super empowered. But at this meeting, he was so depressed because he thought Prabhupada had rejected us. He was slumped over his harmonium and he was saying, "What's the use of chanting anymore? Prabhupada has rejected us. Our chanting is useless." So, they were preaching this stuff for a couple of days. Finally, the GBC said, okay, the GBC was having their first meeting after Prabhupada established the GBC on paper in July, had 12 people, most of them householders. Then Prabhupada, or the GBC, okay, we're going to have a debate with them in the temple room, this little farmhouse temple in the original New Vrindavan property. We're going to have a debate with them. But because nobody really knew the philosophy that well, nobody could really deliver the knockout punch to defeat the other side. They were just going round and round and back and forth, and there was nothing conclusive. Meanwhile, we were watching this. Prabhupada is God versus Prabhupada's not God. He's a pure devotee. And people are just blooping. They still use that word, blooping? Blooping left and right. People are like, just, they couldn't take it. They thought, my God, what is this movement we joined? It's just like another fighting religion. People are fighting, and then they were just leaving. They just walking down the road, 2 miles to the main road, or to McCrary's Ridge Road. Yeah, it was chaos. It was pandemonium. So, since there was no conclusion, the GBC decided to call Prabhupada. Now, in those days, calling somebody long distance was a big deal. It was long before cell phones, and even long before you get cards and you pay a cut rate to use a card. So it was. So they caught up to Prabhupada in Tokyo, Japan, where Prabhupada was showing the devotees how to observe Janmashtami and Vyasa Puja, because they didn't know. They didn't know how to do it. This was the first time on a big scale. So the sannyasi's propaganda so disturbed the devotee. Oh, by the way, we need some more light. Turn the light on. The sannyasi's propaganda so disturbed the devotees that the governing body phoned Prabhupada for guidance. What do you say? Only you can solve this, Prabhupada. We're the GBC, but we don't know. We can't. We're totally bewildered of how to, we know you're not God, but we can't defeat them. Prabhupada thundered his reply. So this is what Prabhupada replied. Are you ready? You're reading, right?
Fact. They have committed the greatest offense. There is only one thing worse than underestimating the Guru, overestimating the Guru. They have said, I am God. Therefore, if I am God, they also can become God. This is impersonalism.
Yes, right in the heart of Prabhupada's movement at this Janmashtami Vyasa Puja festival in New Vrindavan with all the leaders there practically. There were some traveling with Prabhupada, but pretty much all the leaders. There was a Mayavad weed growing right in the heart of his movement. So what did Prabhupada do? He uprooted that weed. And he said, after this, he said, expel them. Expel them. He kicked them out. So this is all told on this following Srila Prabhupada DVD series. I'm on there giving my memory of the whole thing. And Brahmananda confessing he was the worst, he was the most envious of Prabhupada. And then Bhagavan comes on, a god brother, and he said, the GBC asked me, he was one of the GBCs, the GBC asked me to round them up, the sannyasis, and drive them out of New Vrindavan, right then, right on the spot. So Bhagavan herded them into his van, drove I think it was about 6 hours. Because I was living in New Vrindavan before when I got initiated, or later. It's about a 6-hour drive to Detroit. So Bhagavan, he drives them to Detroit and locks them in the attic. It was like they had COVID or something, the Prabhupada said, kick them out. So he quarantined them so they couldn't preach to anybody. And these sannyasis are totally bewildered. And then the next day he let them out. He didn't give them any food or water or anything. And luckily it was summer, so it was warm. But all they had was the clothes on their back and their dandas. So what do? They just start walking. They don't know what to do. Walking and chanting. They walked all day. They walked right out of Detroit into a suburb called Dearborn. And then they saw this big tree. It was a nice pine tree, and they saw a nice bed of pine needles. And they just lay down exhausted for the night. Next morning, they woke up at the first light, even before sunup, it was dawn. And they saw that they had slept right next to the headquarters of the Ford Motor Company. in Dearborn, where Ambarish is, his great-grandfather founded the Ford Motor Company. So this is before Ambarish's time, but anyway. And then something miraculous happened, Brahmananda says. So out of nowhere, a little boy comes, and he's carrying a loaf of bread and a big jug of milk. And he says, "My mommy told me to give this to you." So they were famished, they were starving. So they offered the bread and milk. The little boy ran away or disappeared, whatever. And then they had something to eat. Now, who was that little boy? It's like a Krishna story, right? I mean, at dawn, what mother, he said, "My mommy told me to give this to you." What mother would send her little boy on an errand to a bunch of strange-looking people with robes and shaved heads and to give them bread and milk? It doesn't make any sense. It was like totally miraculous. Anyway, they got some strength, and then they hitchhiked to another place near Detroit named Ann Arbor. Anybody ever heard of Ann Arbor? That's where the University of Michigan is. Good school. And so there, Badri Narayan Maharaj passed away not long ago. And he was there. He was the president of Ann Arbor. He wasn't even initiated yet. He was just, he was really very good manager even when he joined. So when the sannyasis arrived at the Ann Arbor temple, there was a letter waiting for them from Prabhupada. It must have been a telegram, actually, because it couldn't have gotten there that fast. And anyway, the gist of the message from Prabhupada was this. So, banishing the offenders from his society, Prabhupada said they could return if they traveled separately and each opened a center, inspired people to take up devotional service and preach the truth. The spiritual master is not God. God is God. The genuine spiritual master is God's authorized representative. Any so-called spiritual master who says he's God is as good as a dog. End of fiction. So they were sincere. Prabhupada gave them a way back. So Prabhupada said to split up, be real sannyasis. So Vishnu John went to Austin, Texas. Subal went to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Gargamuni went to Gainesville, Florida. And Brahmananda went to Miami. And they each opened up a center, and they recruited devotees. And after 6 months, they were allowed, Prabhupada allowed them back into ISKCON Devotees Association. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds wacko. Did you ever hear this? Prabhupada is God story? No? It actually, can you imagine? You can't even imagine it today, maybe, but that's what they said. Prabhupada is God. Okay, here's another impersonal fiction.
Fiction. ISKCON is Prabhupada.
Let's see. Okay. Although less obvious than the previous fiction, the giveaway is to equate ISKCON in all respects with Srila Prabhupada repeats the impersonal flaw of oneness without difference. Prabhupada's flawless statement on the subject. So, Okay, so Prabhupada had a famous statement. Quote, ISKCON is my body. So the ISKCON, the organization ISKCON, is his energy, his body, his vehicle to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. But the body and the person, they're one in one sense, but they're different too, just like us. We're embodied souls, so we're connected to the body, but ultimately we're not the body. Although that quotation was never recorded, so yeah, ISKCON is my body, that was never recorded. But there was enough ear witness testimony that we accepted. Plus, Prabhupada said something else you're going to see on the screen. That's the same thing. Although that quotation was never recorded, reliable ear-witness testimony is abundant, and the following Prabhupada letter excerpt says the same thing. Here's a letter excerpt to Brahmananda.
Fact, you are all my limbs of my body. Unless you cooperate, my life will be useless. The senses and life are correlative. Without life, the senses cannot act, and without sense, life is inactive.
So life means something sentient. They go together. Yeah. So, and that was, 68 letter. Interestingly, Prabhupada also rejected as material this fiction's reverse. Prabhupada is ISKCON. Listen to this. In a room conversation with London students on July 15, 1973, Srila Prabhupada gave this example. Quote, suppose if I say, now he's saying this to students visiting the manor. He's not even saying this to devotees. Well, there were some devotees there, but he's saying it to devotees and students. Suppose if I say, I am everything in this my institution. Does it mean I have lost my personality? No. No. If somebody says that Bhaktivedanta Swami is everything, does it mean I have lost my personality? That is material understanding. Again, oneness without difference is a fiction. Reality means oneness and difference. Not just oneness and not just difference. Okay, here's another one, another impersonal fiction.
Fiction, the GBC is Prabhupada.
This fiction betrays an incomplete understanding of the first item Srila Prabhupada declared in his will. So now Prabhu's going to read the first sentence of Prabhupada's last will and testament, and it has to do with the GBC. Go ahead.
Fact, the governing body commission, GBC, will be the ultimate managing authority for the entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
A few weeks after Srila Prabhupada signed his will, he called for his personal secretary, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, in the middle of the night. TKG's June 27th diary entry tells what happened next. So this is from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Quote, he could not sleep, he meaning Prabhupada. He could not sleep. Thinking of the will had kept him up. So then Prabhupada asks Tamal a kind of loaded question to see what Tamal is going to say. Quote, amongst the GBC, have you selected one after me who will succeed? And then TKG says, I replied that we felt that we should manage together as a group, that none of us was more qualified than the others. And then Prabhupada says, yes, each of you can be Acharya of your zone. Not that you're somehow going to replace the founder Acharya, but you can be Acharyas, exemplars of in your zone. Acharya, yes, but not the founder Acharya. A crucial distinction it would take the GBC years to officially assert. After Prabhupada's passing, although some ISKCON zones continued to thrive, regional imitations of His Divine Grace's singular position sometimes turned the zones into cultish kingdoms. This is the 1980s, the infamous zonal Acharya era, which I don't think any of you in this room were in ISKCON then. I think, Mataji, you came in the 90s, right? Yeah, so in the 80s, it was, well, actually even in the 90s it was lingering, but in the 80s that was the worst of it. And some people were accepting worship on Prabhupada's level. It was really bad. It practically almost ruined ISKCON. Came very close. Cultish kingdoms. The offenses devastated many, gurus and disciples alike. After the imitation had sufficiently abated, the GBC began to consider more deeply Prabhupada's mandate for the body. So Prabhupada had said in his last will that the GBC is to be the ultimate managing authority for ISKCON. So now that the GBC is coming to terms with that, what does that mean? Okay. Let's see. Okay. At last, in June 2012, it was decades later, the GBC published a more mature understanding of the body as the Society's ultimate managing authority in its paper, quote, Harmonizing ISKCON's Lines of Authority. So this is an excerpt from that. So you're going to read.
When we use the word authority in the context of a managerial structure, we do not mean an absolute, infallible authority, such as the authority of scriptures, but the mandate to organize the preaching movement so that it is aligned with the instruction of Srila Prabhupada.
Right. So again, the GBC is Prabhupada as a fiction because it is incomplete, recognizing the oneness but ignoring the difference between ISKCON's perfect founder Acharya and its ultimate, yet imperfect, managing authority, the governing body commission. Okay, and now we're going to do one more impersonal fiction. Jai, Hare Krishna. Yeah, we've seen this before. Only I just used it for this slide too, this point too. It's so good. Okay, go ahead.
Fiction. Prabhupada is the guru only for his initiated disciples.
Yeah, that's not true. So here we go. Let's go to the fact. Well, first I'll say here. This is a hangover from ISKCON's zonal Acharya nightmare. This impersonal fiction arose from ignorance of the founder Acharya's personal, foundational role in the lives of all generations of his followers. In 1994, as Srila Prabhupada's centennial celebrations were approaching, the GBC was able to pass its first Founder Acharya resolution, which began as follows. So here we're going to, okay.
Fact. Srila Prabhupada is the foundational Shiksha Guru for all ISKCON devotees because he has realized and presented the teaching of the previous acharyas of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya approximately for the modern age. Appropriately for the modern age.
Yeah, he's taken the siddhanta of the whole, ancient sampradaya, and he's been able to express it appropriately for the modern age so people would understand the conclusions. Prabhupada's writing is so sophisticated yet so simple. And that's a sign of real realization. In the modern age, generally, people think that sophisticated means something complicated. If it's not complicated, it's not high, it's not sophisticated. Goodbye. Turn the phone off. Okay. But Prabhupada's purports and verse translations are so well expressed. He can take a complex, sophisticated concept and express it in very simple language. That's a sign of a very high realization. Okay. So that resolution, 1994, was passed in Mayapur in March. It's the first of a few. There's been others since then about Prabhupada's position as founder Acharya. Now, that same year, in Mayapur, something happened. The resolution was passed in March, and then several months later, there was Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day, in August or September, I'm not sure, it's always right around this time. So at ISKCON Mayapur, some 5 months after this resolution was passed, the day of Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja arrived. As the sun rose outside the temple, a Prabhupada initiate was chanting on his beads. A godbrother of mine who told me the story was chanting on his beads when he noticed a young devotee had stopped chanting to have a morning snack. Tactfully, the elder approached the younger. "Oh, Prabhu, maybe you didn't know. We're fasting till noon today for Srila Prabhupada's fasting." Right? Squinting upward, the snacker okay. Squinting upward, the snacker shot back. "You say that because Prabhupada is your spiritual master. He's not my spiritual master." Whoa. And with that, he resumed his snack, his pizza chomping. Incredulous, my godbrother couldn't believe what he just heard. Incredulous, the Prabhupada initiate didn't know what to say. So he just walked away, thinking, I guess no one told us about that founder Acharya resolution that was passed right in Mayapur, where he was a brahmachari. Right? Now there have been more founder Acharya resolutions since then, but we don't need more legislation about Prabhupada's position when education. So now let's dispel some sentimental fictions about His divine grace. So now we're going to go from the impersonal to sentimental fictions. All right, here we go. I call this, let's see. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Sentimental fictions. Illusory Prabhupada.
Yeah, we're going to look at that first, and then
A figurehead Prabhupada. Gone forever Prabhupada. Diksha Guru forever Prabhupada.
notice I didn't say the R word. Diksha Guru forever. Yeah, okay, let's look at one by one. All right. This fiction takes its title from ISKCON educator Borijan Prabhu's account of what happened while he and his wife, Jagatarini Dasi, were pioneering Krishna consciousness in Hong Kong. To attract Chinese people to Krishna in the early 1970s, Prabhupada had allowed Borijan and Jagatarini to adjust their appearance and dress. So yeah, Borijan wrote Prabhupada and said, you know, it would help if we could, to attract the Chinese, because Hong Kong then was, it's still full of Chinese people. If we could just grow our hair out a little and maybe wear clothes that looks like them. Who's this? Yeah, please, off. Somebody tell that guy to go outside. Is that the doorbell or a phone? Oh, that's somebody else. Okay. So, as students started coming to their evening programs, they made more adjustments to their food, music, mood, and decor. They had an apartment in Hong Kong. And so they just changed it to make everything, look good for students. Which in turn attracted more guests. The Chinese were becoming devotees. But as they adapted their outreach, however, Borijan and Jagatarini also began to neglect their spiritual practices. Resting and rising later, they were chanting Hare Krishna without the support and focus the quiet early morning hours provide. The Brahma Muhurta, designed by Krishna for God realization. They found themselves too busy to study Prabhupada's books, and material desires began to re-enter their hearts. But, flush with success, they imagined they still had Prabhupada's approval. Because externally, at least, there were results. There were a lot of students coming around for their apartment programs. Then an aerogram arrived. This is how Prabhupada communicated. This is before fax or you'd see these blue aerograms would float in from wherever Prabhupada was. and that was like a big event. Whenever anybody got a letter from Prabhupada, it was like, okay, what did Prabhupada say? There was no question of, even if it was addressed to one person, everybody had to hear it. Because it was the latest communication from Prabhupada. So it was just Borijan and Jagatarini. But the aerogram was from Satsvarup Maharaj. This is 1974, and GBCs were taking turns serving Prabhupada. Then an aerogram arrived. In 2 weeks, Prabhupada would be arriving in Hong Kong, his secretary wrote. So get ready. By the time Prabhupada arrived, Borijan and Jagatarini had prepared a beautiful rose garland. They hired somebody actually to make a florist to make a beautiful long rose garland, and arranged a fancy hotel room. After picking Prabhupada up in a Rolls Royce, they rented a Rolls Royce to pick him up at the airport, right? It was like a big show. They expressed to Prabhupada how wonderful it was to see him. But Prabhupada had this uncanny way of knowing where his disciples were at, no matter how things looked externally. So they were saying, "Oh, Prabhupada, it's so great to see you." Turning to Borijan, Prabhupada was grave. So what is your morning program? What is your morning program? It didn't exist. They had abandoned it. They were working actually. They were selling tapestries, selling Persian carpets too. And then after work they'd, go to the beach and kind of mumble their rounds. It was really, they were getting weak spiritually. What is your morning program? Well, Prabhupada, we don't really have so many guests in the morning right now, so we usually don't have much of a morning program. Uh-oh. Prabhupada disapproved. Here's what he said. Guests may or may not be coming, but why don't you have a morning program? Whose disciple are you? Shaken awake, Prabhupada realized he had become a disciple of illusion. He was becoming an illusory disciple of an illusory Prabhupada. Now read this. Here, this is on the slide. This is what Borijan said. Borijan tells this story in his book, My Glorious Master.
I had been imagining a Prabhupada that allowed a compromise of purity and Krishna consciousness practices. When I was suddenly confronted by the real Prabhupada, the illusory Prabhupada dissolved like mist after sunrise. Prabhupada, as he himself said, was 90% liberal, but that other 10% was strict.
Yeah. So Illusory Prabhupada. Despite his disciples' preaching success, Prabhupada knew that if they continued to neglect their spiritual practices, they would gradually succumb to the Lord's illusory energy. To avoid becoming illusory disciples of an illusory Prabhupada, we need to continue living in the clear light of his protective instructions. Okay, here's another fictional, sentimental fiction.
Figurehead Prabhupada.
Reigning for 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II became England's longest-serving monarch, and perhaps the most popular one too, as the adoring crowds on her Jubilee tours attested. Yet the revered queen had no real authority over her people, no parliamentary power like the Prime Minister. Elizabeth's influence was essentially sentimental, because, like almost all monarchs today, she was a figurehead. By contrast, when Srila Prabhupada toured ISKCON as its founder Acharya, he commanded absolute authority over his disciples. He did this by the transcendental knowledge he revealed, as well as his own enduring example of pure devotional service. Keen to inspire all generations of his followers, Prabhupada took steps to protect his foundational role in ISKCON. One step was the introduction of his daily Guru Puja. There was no Sri Guru Charana Padma, Guru Puja as we know it, until 1974. That's when Prabhupada introduced it. In April 1974, after one of his morning walks on Bombay's Juhu Beach, Prabhupada went up to the temple as usual to offer his respects to the deities. So it was just darshan, just like we have darshan. And the way they did darshan was that Prabhupada and the devotees went up and they'd take a bunch of flowers and they'd offer it to the deities. But one morning, at the time, the devotees would offer flowers both to the deities and to Prabhupada. But this morning, in plain view of the altar, Prabhupada sat on his dais to receive full worship, with his disciples singing Sri Guru Vandana, a traditional Bengali song glorifying the Guru. So Prabhupada taught them the words to the song, Sri Guru Charana Padma, and then gave him the translation too. The song praises pure service to the Guru as the way to obtain the full mercy of God. Since Prabhupada was the only Guru in ISKCON when he introduced the song, his first followers didn't realize its full import. Yeah, when I remember I was serving in Gainesville, Florida, and our temple president, Amarendra, in 74, brought this song back with him from the 74 Mayapur festival. That was the first festival of any big size. And so he brought back this song to add, to the morning program. So we just thought, oh, cool, a new song, But, and Prabhupada was the only guru in ISKCON. He was the founder Acharya, he was the Diksha Guru, he was the Shiksha Guru, he was everything. But now that we live in a multiple guru culture, and especially when you're at a place like Mayapur where people are visiting from all over the world during Guru Puja, and you see people from everywhere, South America, China, Russia, Europe, Africa, you really get the sense of Prabhupada's position as founder Acharya. Yes. Today, as successive generations of gurus and disciples come together daily to sing to Prabhupada, the significance of his position as our founder Acharya, the Jagat Guru, continues to expand. So let's read this.
The Guru, especially the Jagat Guru, is not like a family priest for performing ritual ceremonies, nor is he a figurehead appointed by the institution without a real presence in the heart and mind of his followers. Rather, he is the core of his followers' very being. He is my Lord birth after birth.
And that's, he is my Lord, birth after birth. Chakudan dilo janme janme, prabhu say. So, for most of us singing that, Bengali is not our first language. So we sing it, but do we know what it means? Or are we living the import of it? Is he my Lord, birth after birth? Haribo. Okay. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Haribo. Yeah. So, Prabhupada's not a figurehead. He's our very life and soul, as the founder Acharya. Only our failure to follow Prabhupada's teachings will leave us with a sentimental figurehead Prabhupada, leading to the next frenzied fiction.
Gone forever, Prabhupada.
So Prabhupada's having a good laugh about that, it looks like. Well, actually, he's laughing at something else. It's a morning walk in Germany, but I use it because it's laughable to us now if we're fixed in Vani. Gone forever, Prabhupada. On July 16th, 1975, at a packed press conference in Berkeley, California, a reporter challenged Srila Prabhupada. What will happen to the movement when you die? So the reporter thought they had him, hey, you're an old man. What's going to happen to this thing when you die? So Prabhupada, again, there's a saying in English, the best defense is a good offense. You ever heard this? So Prabhupada immediately said, I will never die. I shall live in my books and you will utilize. He was saying this to the reporter. I will live in my books and you will utilize. Prabhupada said his books will be the law books for mankind for the next 10,000 years. So he's going to live forever in his instructions. If Prabhupada's reply sounded defiant, it was also an invitation. To know Krishna and transcend death, anyone could read and apply the knowledge he was translating and explaining in his books, especially his followers, who rested, as Prabhupada wrote, through the night. The problem, he would chide them, so he would scold us. He said, the problem is that you don't read my books. You think they're just for selling and collecting book points at Lakshmi. And no, they're for you. First, especially you're my disciples. The problem was that they didn't read his books, where he was making himself most available. What did Prabhupada call his purports? His what? Do you know? His ecstasies. So if we want to be intimate with Prabhupada, we have to associate with his ecstasies. Okay. As inspirational as Prabhupada's personal presence was, his writings speak of a deeper intimacy by following his instructions. Indeed, this was his own experience while executing the order of his spiritual master. Although he was only with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta perhaps a half dozen times, Prabhupada always felt him to be right by his side.
There is no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore, his words of direction should be the pride of the disciple.
The pride of the disciple, pride in the good sense of this is the life and soul of the disciple that he's going to share with others, as many as he can. Although Prabhupada's form and initiations were certainly divine, I just was listening to an initiation, where was it this morning? It was in Toronto. It was June 18th, 1976, and he was giving names, and he was asking him what the 4 rules are. And Prabhupada was saying how, now remember, you're making promises here before the deities, the sacred fire, the Vaishnavas and the spiritual master, him at that time. So keep these promises. This is not, the initiation doesn't mean you're done, it means you're begun, you're beginning now. So it was very dramatic the way Prabhupada said it. Should be the pride of the disciple. Although Prabhupada's form and initiations were certainly divine, it is his everlasting instructions that sustain us over time. Quote, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. Quote, living still and sound, Prabhupada will now dispel another forever fiction. Okay, so here's another forever. We had Diksha Guru forever, gone forever, and now we'll have Diksha Guru forever.
Diksha Guru forever, Prabhupada.
This sentimental fiction arose in the 1980s as a reaction to those zonal acharyas who were imitating the position of the founder acharya. It's something we created, this whole Ritvik thing. There's Dikshism. It's just all about the Diksha Guru, and they were acting like cult leaders, some of these people. And so people knew it was wrong. And so, we all knew it was wrong, actually. And that's why it went. We had to go. There was a Guru reform movement, finally, in the 80s. But those who knew it was wrong decided to make up some other concoction thing. So listen to this. To protest Guru abuse. So they were protesting Guru abuse. And they were right to do that. But here's how they did it. By claiming that the founder Acharya appointed himself as everyone's perpetual Diksha Guru, betrays ignorance of Prabhupada's consistent teachings. For example, read this.
This is the law of disciplic succession. I want to see my disciple become a bona fide spiritual master and spread Krishna consciousness very widely. That will make me and Krishna very happy.
Yeah. That was 75. So, let's see. Yeah. Just 6 months after this letter, in a lecture in Honolulu, Prabhupada declared,
because people are in darkness, we require many millions of gurus to enlighten them. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is, he said, that every one of you become guru. If you say, but I have no qualification, how can I become guru? There is no need for qualification. Still, I can become guru? Yes. How? Whomever you meet, you simply instruct what Krishna has said. That's all. You become guru.
That's all. You become guru. Millions of gurus. Okay. In other words, no need to sentimentally and unauthorizedly, by the way, appoint Srila Prabhupada as everyone's perpetual Diksha Guru, when all his disciplic descendants already have him as their founder Acharya. Founder Acharya is a much more exalted position than initiating Guru. Blessed are the Gurus, Shiksha and Diksha, who enrich, enhance, and deepen that foundational relationship all generations can have with his divine grace. Yeah. You don't have to make up some philosophy, Ritvik, that Prabhupada wanted. He's the Diksha Guru of everybody. Why Diksha Guru? You already got him as the founder Acharya. And I said, blessed are all the Shiksha and Diksha Gurus who enrich, enhance, and deepen their disciples' relationship with the founder Acharya. That's the way ISKCON will go on. Prabhupada is the unity amidst our ever-increasing diversity. Now, I did add one more last year. when I was in Toronto, and I'm continuing it this year. And here it is.
A. Prabhupada.
Well, Prabhupada is supposed to be the I.
Oh.
AI Prabhupada.
AI Prabhupada. Okay.
Now, by the grace of the digital age, we can add one more to our list of fictional Prabhupads. And take the remote, soon we're going to have a audio. Yeah, set it to 70. Okay, that's good. Now by the grace of the digital age, we can add one more to our list of fictional Prabhupads. AI Prabhupada. Let's see, how do I... Yeah, go ahead.
Like any powerful tool, AI can help us or hurt us. For example, AI can help us organize a presentation based on Srila Prabhupada's spoken and written words. But if the AI program we use speculates or hallucinates meanings for those words Prabhupada never intended, we may end up with the unconscious bias of its programmers. Or worst, AI's deep fakes are improving so rapidly that bad actors can make Prabhupada say and do things he never actually said or did. And only digital experts or expert Prabhupada followers can detect the hoax.
The hoax. That said, okay, so I say this, now we're going to do a little exercise. That said, see if you can tell if the following audio slide is really Srila Prabhupada speaking, or is it a fictional Prabhupada? Now, you're not allowed to participate because you know from last year. Okay, here we go.
A spiritual master takes his devout disciples as his spiritual ones. That is the position. He thinks that Krishna has sent me so many spiritual masters. He does not think himself as spiritual master. He thinks himself their servant because they are to be trained. Krishna has appointed him to train them. Therefore, he thinks himself as the servant of himself. This is the position.
So, real Prabhupada or fictional Prabhupada? So, how many think this is a real quote? And how many? Okay, so we have one. Two? Okay, anybody else think it's real? Three. Remember, the deep fakes are so good these days. You can just take, you know how they just take a little bit of somebody's voice and they can make a whole, they can take a picture of you shaking hands with George Washington on the moon, and talking. Okay, so raise your hands again if you think it's real. 1, 2, 3. Oh. Prabhu is hedging here. He's got his hand. All right, how many think it's fake? 1, 2, 3. Looks like everybody else is abstaining. What about you, Mataji?
I heard that Prabhupada Guru was saying this, that his disciples are his guru.
You said that Bhaktisiddhanta said this?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's not what Prabhupada's saying here. I mean, he didn't say my Guru Maharaj, but you're saying Prabhupada got that.
I read it, it's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that
Okay.
all these disciples, they are actually my gurus.
Yeah, it's from Brave Vishnu. I remember that.
Oh, from Rupa Vilas, Ray of Vishnu. Acha. Okay.
But I never heard the Prabhupada said this.
Yes. Okay. So we're about split, I think, between the abstentions and the and the yays and the nays. So this is real. Prabhupada said this in Vrindavan, in the courtyard at the Radha Damodar temple. That's where the picture is. And Prabhupada's lecturing on the nectar of devotion, actually, about the spiritual master and the disciple. It's October 23rd, 1972. And it's really striking how when you hear what a spiritual master, takes his disciples as his spiritual master, it's like, huh? What does that mean? But then Prabhupada's explaining. He's thinking that he is their servant. They have to be trained. Bhaktisiddhanta also said we should understand the potency of a spiritual master not by how many disciples he makes, but by how many gurus he makes. Kalakanta has this, says this a lot. In other words, if you make disciples who actually are in turn going to become gurus, that's a real guru to continue the disciplic succession, to expand Krishna consciousness. Okay, good. So, real NOD lecture, 23rd October 1972, Vrindavan, India. To sum up, full immersion in our founder Acharya's life, teachings, mood, and mission is the best prevention and cure for all kinds of fictional Prabhupads. Yeah, that's the vaccination. Full immersion in Prabhupada's life, teachings, mood, and mission. Otherwise, we can be misled, by what people say. All right, now we're going to go to the learning outcomes.
Can I have without comments about this?
Yeah.
So far for today, there is no technology that can reproduce veritably Prabhupada's voice. You will recognize it immediately. Because I tried many different ways, there's no way.
Oh,
And
have devotees tried?
Yeah, and second, legally, it's not allowed. There's no, only if that's violating law, we can use someone else's voice.
By their permission?
No. It's called voice cloning, and we are legally not allowed to clone anyone else's voice without his permission.
Yes, without his permission.
That's therefore, especially Prabhupada. So whoever would try doing that would be straight illegal.
Yeah,
So,
we could bust them.
so these two factors, so far, they save us. So
Yeah, I mean, it can be done, but it's illegal. That's what you're saying. Or are you saying that Prabhupada's voice is so unique you can't even
still,
imitate?
can I say unfortunately, but it cannot be done in a faithful way. We will immediately recognize.
Uh-huh.
Because Prabhupada has very, very specific accent. I tried it, Prabhu. I tried. It's impossible.
Yes, okay, good. So you can detect when I'm doing the Prabhupada voice that it's not Prabhupada, even though it sounds pretty good, but good, okay, very good. Okay, so learning outcomes?
So lesson 9, fictional Prabhupada learning outcomes. By now we should be able to explain the difference between impersonal and sentimental fictions about Srila Prabhupada. Identify and dispel 4 impersonal fictions about Srila Prabhupada. Identify and dispel 4 sentimental fiction about Srila Prabhupada. Detect when an AI Prabhupada is fictional. Identify the best prevention and cure for all kinds of fictional Prabhupads.
I think that's, yeah, okay. All right, good. First question comes from Amala Harinam, Prabhu.
The part where you were mentioning about figurehead Prabhupada
Yeah.
was kind of hard for me to understand.
Figure.
Even last time I was just a little blank. Would you like to just rephrase it and explain it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I put the Queen up there because she's a great example. I don't think there's any monarchy that really has, unless you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there are a few monarchies, like Denmark, they have a monarchy. And England, like they just had a new prime minister come in. What's his name? I forget. Yeah, the new one. Not Starmer. Starmer's out, and then there's a new one. You know the new one? I forget his name even. They've had so many in recent years. So he went to, the ritual was he went to, because the authority coming from old days is in the House of Windsor, the king, right, since Henry VIII, right? So the prime minister went to the king to get his blessings, and the new prime minister pledged to execute his duties properly. He actually has the power. So when Prabhupada was, well, still, if we're really tuned in, if he is, he's the founder of Acharya, and it's by his example and by his wisdom that he's commanding our respect. It's not that, you know, that we're just sentimentally accepting Prabhupada. No, he's representative of the whole parampara, and that's why I put that founder Acharya resolution up there. He's taken the teachings of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya and he's presented them appropriately for the modern age. There's more to that resolution we'll see in tomorrow night's lesson. So if we're actually following Prabhupada, we want him to rule us. We want him to, we want him to be our life and soul. It's not simply some figurehead thing where it's, oh yeah, Prabhupada's my guru. And even people in my generation, you know, Prabhupada initiated fewer than 5,000 disciples. They took initiation from Srila Prabhupada, but they didn't really follow. They fell away. And they might say, yes, I'm a disciple. We've run across this in Tucson, where I live. Sometimes people come in, oh yeah, I was so-and-so and I was initiated in 1975. But what have you been doing since then? You're not really a disciple of Prabhupada. Disciple means what? Prabhupada said. Disciple means discipline. You got to follow the rules and regulations. You got to follow the whole life that Prabhupada gave us. That's what makes us disciples. That's why I said, Prabhupada said on the recording this morning in Toronto, so you're making these promises before the deities and the devotees and the fire, so keep them. That's what makes you a disciple. And in that quote, in his absence, the words of the Guru is the pride of the disciple. Yes. Yeah. So, the more we follow our gurus, and especially Srila Prabhupada, the more we understand the reality that it's not just a token or a superficial thing. You know, when Queen Elizabeth, when she would go on her tours, people were just falling at her feet all over the place. They loved her because she was a principled lady. She did her 70 years, longer than anyone. Her first was her golden jubilee, then the diamond jubilee, 60, 50, 60, 70 years. So, but she didn't have any real power. I mean, they loved her, but it's not that she was making the laws of the land for England. That was the Parliament and House of Lords, House of Commons, and the Prime Minister especially. So let us let Prabhupada rule our lives. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the best part. Question about China. With Jan Prabhu, you said
Can't turn it off?
I can help you if you want.
I know, I put it on Do Not Disturb, it's still coming on. I put it on Do Not Disturb, it's still coming
So, in China, Prabhupada asked them about the morning program.
Hong
Buddha
Kong,
Jumbo,
yeah.
and do you know what follows? How the story?
How it continued?
Yeah, how it continues.
Yeah. Well, no, they just woke up. They said, "Oh, yes, Srila Prabhupada." Yeah. So they resumed their, the life that Prabhupada gave them, rising early, worshiping the deity, chanting rounds, hearing Bhagavatam. I don't know what became of their preaching. It must be in the book. My glorious master. But he did save them from just getting weak and compromised and just. That's how Maya works. She's really dangerous when you lose your spiritual life gradually. It just seems like one little thing goes, then another thing. Sometimes devotees do bad things just on the spot, Prabhupada compared it to Maya having a gun at your head. I'll give you an example. At New Vrindavan in 1973, maybe you've heard of when a motorcycle gang shot up the place. Yeah. So it's a long story of why they came and why they were shooting guns. But at gunpoint, the gangsters, they forced a devotee and a guest to take the forms of Radha Vrindavan Chandra. You've been to New Vrindavan, any of you? Yeah. And smash them on the floor. And luckily, they were broken cleanly at the limbs, legs and the shoulders. And luckily also there was a sculptor at New Vrindavan named Bhagavatananda who knew how to repair. So they quickly, Kirtanananda Maharaj telegrammed Prabhupada about what happened and can we repair them? And Prabhupada said, yes, you can do that. And then just put them back on the altar. So the devotee especially, the guest is just the guest, but the devotee, I know who the devotee is, and he just did something because he was scared to death that they were going to blow his brains out if he didn't, smash the deities. So that's one thing, and then you can recover when Maya has you like that. It's easier to recover from that because you did something really bad, and then you just, you're chastened, and then you get back on the track. But when little by little, it's so subtle, you don't even know it's happening. And then one day you wake up and where are you? You're in some brothel, or you're in some you're in some bar. How did this happen, Because Maya is expert at knowing what our weakness is. One time a devotee said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, there's Maya in the temple. There's Maya in the temple. So Prabhupada said, that is not surprising. What is surprising is that in Kali Yuga, that there is a temple at all. That's surprising. Yeah. So, I'd have to look at that book again. And it's actually on the database, if you have the database, glorification of Prabhupada. Firstly, Lamberton, you just scroll down and that's right in there, my glorious master. And you type in a few keywords. And, probably Borijan. I read it too, I forget. But I was at Gita Nagari with Borijan for some years. When I got there in 1979, 80, he was there. He was the Gurukula headmaster. And I asked him, this is years before he wrote this book, but he and Jagat Tarini were at Gita Nagari, and they were doing Gurukula. They were the ashram teachers for these teenage boys. Oh boy, it was tough. But anyway, so he told me, getting to know him, he told me that he and Jagat Tarini were in Hong Kong all by themselves. Didn't have any association. And so I said, wow, how did you survive? So Borijan just said to me, what makes you think I survived? In other words, before Prabhupada came, we were out of it, we were going down. But they didn't realize it, because Maya had deceived them into thinking that they were still following. Yeah. So. And also, there's films. There's films of Prabhupada. Again, Yadabar made this Following Srila Prabhupada DVD series. And to make that, he found all the films that anybody ever took of Prabhupada, starting in 1965 at Dr. Mishra's ashram in Monroe, New York, all the way up to 77. Most of them were taken by Yadabar, actually, and his wife Vishaka, the photographer. But there's one in Melbourne in 1974, and you see Borijan there, and he's come back to the temple. I guess he's out of Hong Kong by then, and he's got hair, and he's kind of looking a little bewildered. So he had come to the Melbourne temple. Yeah. Anyway, if you're in Krishna consciousness long enough, Kritamalak can attest, you go through there's some hard times you can go through, right? There's some ups and downs. I've been through them. And but what saves us is Prabhupada and remembering his instructions. And sometimes, like during the zonal Acharya era, it got so bad. There was so much imitation of Prabhupada going on in the 80s, Prabhupada's position. It was tearing the movement apart. And so people would ask me, they would say, hey, Suresvar, what's becoming of the Hare Krishna movement? And I'd say, the Hare Krishna movement is alive and well in your bead bag. Chant Hare Krishna. And it was, Krishna's actually in charge of the movement, but he lets us go through these things. Yeah, so we can get stronger. What's that saying? It's the things that almost kill you that make you strong. Yeah. So we went through that thing. I was a brand new bhakta. There was a Mayavad weed right in 1970 at New Vrindavan. I saw what Prabhupada did. He uprooted the weed. He expelled them. He gave them away back. And then in 76, another thing I witnessed. It was the last time we saw Prabhupada. But there was a full-blown Sahajya weed in his movement. Have you ever heard of the Gopi Baba Club? Okay. That's what we called it. It was like a joke, the GBC, Gopi Baba Club. Right? It was people who had just produced, in that famous marathon, 17 books in 2 months at the BBT. You heard of the marathon, right? It's a famous thing. In 1975, the BBT produced 17 books in 2 months. Prabhupada demanded it. He said, I'm writing all these books and the manuscripts are piling up. You're not producing the books. So then Ramaswara, this is on a morning walk, he says, so Prabhupada, we figured out that if we work really hard, we can produce a book every 2 months. So Prabhupada replied, this is on Venice Beach, morning walk. Prabhupada says, 17 books in 2 months. He's saying one book every 2 months. 17 books in 2 months. And so Ramaswar practically lost his life air when he heard that. He said, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And so what did Prabhupada famously say? Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary, right? And so when Radha Ballava, who was the BBT general manager, and Ramaswar, who was the overall head, heard Prabhupada say that, they realized that Prabhupada was serious, that if they didn't produce 17 books in 2 months, that their spiritual life was finished, that they had to do this. And as soon as they surrendered to that order, then Krishna flooded them with realization of how it could be done. And how it was done was, it was 24-hour, round-the-clock BBT production with devotees taking turns, shifts. There was, the morning shift, the afternoon shift, the all-night shift. So anybody who was at the BBT, who was working during the marathon, was chanting their 16 rounds, taking their prasad, and then they were getting right to whether they were painting pictures or they were editing, or, it was just like, it was like samadhi. It was trance. They were just in a marathon samadhi. And I got to the BBT just after what the devotees called the rush. That's how they called it, the rush. And they were still kind of buzzing about the rush. So anyway, some of the people who were involved in producing those books, afterwards, after the rush, they decided, because most of it was CC, so they decided that they were going to just focus on Krishna's intimate dealings with the gopis, that part of CC. Anyway, there's so much involved, but anyway, so then Prabhupada, this is, and I heard about this, when I came in January, and I learned how to index the books. But then Prabhupada came to town in June, and he had heard about this too, kind of vaguely, but then when he came in June, 76, one morning, Prabhupada was just about to take his breakfast in his quarters. He had some dried fruit and nuts in his hand, And then Prajumna, his Sanskrit editor, came running in Prabhupada's room, didn't pay his obeisances or anything. And Prabhupada said, Prajumna said, Srila Prabhupada, I just heard the leader of this group, this CC study group, they were presenting themselves as CC study group, minimize the value of your Bhagavad Gita. And that's because I went to one of their meetings and I knew something was wrong because I was memorizing the Gita. And they were just dismissing the importance of the Gita. They were saying, oh, Prabhu, it's just ABC. It's about the modes of nature. There's much more nectar. So as soon as Prajumna said, Prabhupada, they're minimizing the value of your Bhagavad Gita, that morsel of fruit and nuts, it never reached Prabhupada's mouth. He put it in the bowl and he slammed his hand on the desk and said, call all the leaders at once. He meant all the visiting sannyasis and GBCs, and call the leaders of this so-called study group. We're going to settle this right now. So they came in. And the first thing Prabhupada said to them was, why you are jumping like monkeys? Why are you jumping like monkeys? Just turn the thing off. Why are you jumping like monkeys? Monkeys. You've seen monkeys? And you've been to India? Yeah. And what do monkeys do? Well, monkey business. having sex with lady monkeys, right? Stealing things and having sex with girl monkeys. Why are you jumping like monkeys? But these people, they were so intoxicated. They thought they were becoming gopis because they were hearing about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. And so they started arguing with Prabhupada. Can you imagine? So-called disciples arguing with Prabhupada. But Prabhupada, you say in your books, this is the topmost, the parakhi above, the lawless love of the gopis for Krishna. And so Prabhupada immediately, but are you topmost? Lord Chaitanya said, my spiritual master found me to be a great fool, fit only for chanting Hare Krishna. Lord Chaitanya, he's Krishna in the mood of Radha, but he's presenting himself like that, right? So, and then another one of them said, but Prabhupada, these are your books. These are your books were used. This is coming from your books. It's not coming from some Radhakund Babaji's. It's coming from your books. And Prabhupada said, my books are like a drugstore. Prabhupada was a pharmacist, remember? If you want a drug from your pharmacist, you have to approach with a prescription from your doctor. You can't just go in and demand any drug if it's a prescription drug. You have to get the prescription from your doctor. So my prescription for you is first Kurukshetra Lila, Bhagavad Gita, first Kurukshetra Lila, then Rasa Lila. First deserve, then desire. You got to be qualified. You're not like the 6 Goswamis who were diving and surfacing in the waves of the gopis' love for Krishna. You're just monkeys. Why are you jumping like monkeys? And then Prabhupada said, if he started pleading with them for their own good. He said, please stop this. Don't do this. Trying to understand what the gopis' love for Krishna is at your stage is like a little child trying to understand what sex life is when he's just a 4 or 5-year-old or something, When his body matures, he will understand it because he'll feel it. So similarly, when your spiritual life matures, you will understand these things, and you won't take it as some lusty desires like boys and girls in the material world. And that's what they had already started doing. Because some ladies in the BBT, they had already started a group. So it was only a matter of time before the ladies and the guys get together and have their own Rasa Leela, right? Yeah. So I feel pretty privileged to observe it in New Vrindavan and to observe it in LA, how Prabhupada, how he just uprooted it. Yeah. Okay, it's getting late. So, are we done? But tomorrow, so now that we've cleared the decks, we've cleared away the fictional Prabhupads, now we can actually enter into, tomorrow it's called Your Srila Prabhupada, tomorrow night. It's all about how we can develop our, I know you're already doing it, how we can improve developing our relationship, personal relationship, because everybody's got a different personal relationship with Prabhupada. Okay, 6:45. You want to say one more?
Last short question.
There's a what?
The recipe that doctor gives us.
Prescription. What about it?
How do we get this prescription? Who is it? Our guru or who is it?
Well, by following our founder Acharya, with the help of our Shiksha and Diksha Gurus. Remember I said they enrich, enhance, and deepen our relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Then Krishna is pleased. Only when Krishna one of the symptoms of pure devotional service, it says in NOD, is that it's very rare. Why? Because it says in NOD, because by getting pure devotional service, Krishna himself is purchased. So Krishna is not going to let him be purchased by a nonsense who's going to betray him. Yeah, he's not going to give his heart to us unless he sees that we're actually sincere and done with karma, gyan, yoga, whatever material desires we have. So, okay, I can't speak more because I don't have it. And I know how to get it, but I'm not on that level yet, so. But it's a process from Shraddha to Prem. But we got to go through all the steps. No cheating. Can't skip. First Kurukshetra Leela, then Rasa Leela. First deserve, then desire. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Who likes the garland? Yay, the reader gets the garland. Hot milk at, say 9. 9. And only give me a half a cup?
Huh?
Half a cup tonight. Yeah, because I'm peeing too much in the night. Full cup is, too much. Oh, I heard from, yeah. Thank you. Mercy. Hare Krishna. Toward my next India trip.
There's not so much.
What's that?
It's just the US.
Yeah, this is easier. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think you asked me, right, about checks. Was it you?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is much easier. Thank you. Because I always take a cut if I do it at